This is the Today with Tally podcast.
And welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast, folks. We have a great show in store for you. We have Steve Toth joining us from the Texas State House. That's right, folks. We have a contentious race heating up here in Texas, too, where we have Steve Toth battling the incumbent Dan Crenshaw, who's currently serving his fourth term in Congress. Now, Steve has definitely stepped up to the plate and is giving old Congressman Dan Crenshaw a run for his money. Now, Dan Crenshaw has represented the Texas 2nd Congressional District since January of 2019 after being elected in 2018. Steve Toth is currently serving in his fifth term in the Texas State House. Now, Steve Toth is definitely ready for this challenge, and he will step right in because, look, let's face it, the constituents of Texas, too, are very disappointed in what Dan Crenshaw has put forward. They're very happy with their Texas House member, Steve Toth. Now, he's not afraid to step up and fight for what's right. He's not a go-along to get along guy like Mr. Crenshaw is. And I could say this about Mr. Crenshaw. There's no slander involved here. He's my member of Congress. I am a constituent, and I am unhappy with his performance. And with that, we're honored to be joined by Steve Toth. How are you, sir?
Good, brother. What's going on?
Well, I'm just drinking a little bit of coffee here in my come and take it.
All right, I like it.
Yeah. How you doing?
Man, I'm good. Just hitting the pavement and working hard, and I'm honestly enjoying the experience. It's been amazing. We're having a lot of fun, meeting a lot of great people. Fundraising's going well. It's like pinch me. It just couldn't be going any better.
Awesome. It seems as if your opponent, the incumbent in Texas, too, Congressman Dan Crenshaw, has been untouchable in this seat for 4 terms now. And it does look like that you could definitely give him a good run for his money. Now, look, I have a couple of questions for you. You're very well known already in the great state of Texas because you are a successful Texas Houseman. And you've done a lot of great work in the Texas House, and you've represented the people of your district very well. And one of the things that you did that really made national news is you came out and you touched things that nobody else wanted to touch. They were afraid to step up to the plate and take that swing. Well, you did just that. You hit a home run, and that was with critical race theory. And I believe it was under House Bill 3979, if my memory serves me correct. And you ended up passing this bill in the Texas House. Now explain just how you were able to do that.
Providence. Honestly, when the whole issue of critical race theory came up, no one had even ever heard of it. And so it was really difficult. I mean, typically big legislation, it takes 2 to 3 sessions. Like dyslexia is an example. 80% of the people in Texas prisons are functionally illiterate. 75% of them are dyslexic. The vast majority of these kids dropped out of high school by their sophomore year. And it took 3 sessions for us to push legislation through that addressed the issue so that these kids are getting services in school, Brian, rather than waiting until they're in prison.
Sure.
And you would think something that common sense would be easy to push, just like you would think that passing a bill that bans critical race theory, which is teaching white children that you're an oppressor, and teaches black children or any children of color that you're oppressed, which has caused immense violence in Texas classrooms for obvious reasons, right? And it's one of the major reasons why white teachers are being harassed and abused in the classroom. And you would think that it would be common sense that this should be an easy thing to pass, but it wasn't. It took all session long, and it wasn't until some really big prominent names saw the legislation and started getting behind it, that we had any ability to push this thing through the process. But I just fought tooth and nail through the whole session to get it done, and we got it done.
And congrats to you. I mean, that was a big bill there,
Yeah.
to get passed, in Texas. And people would even think, like, Texas? This is going on in Texas. What they say is, down goes Texas, down goes the nation. And so we are definitely on the front lines here in keeping America free.
Can I go a little bit more on this?
Yes, yes.
There's a book came out in the 50s called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, by Paulo Freire, and it's Marxism, straight up Marxism. And that book, Brian, is in 70 to 80%. It's probably in 100% of the teaching colleges across the United States, including the ones here in Texas. Roughly 70% of the students in these teaching colleges are reading this book. Millions and millions of copies have been sold. And that is why we're graduating from high school and colleges across the state of Texas and the United States, these young socialists. And yes, the hateful belief and the hateful ideology of critical race theory is in it. And unfortunately, Republicans are shying away from this fight, and they've got to wake up and smell the coffee, or else we're going to lose our state.
Why? What has caused this type of behavior for teachers to indoctrinate our children of Texas?
It's this do-goodism belief. It's this, and I think part of it, honestly, is that as a nation, we've lost our soul. We've lost our connection to God, the Lord. We've forgotten that our rights come from God. They don't come from government. And the more we move away from a relationship with God and understanding his grace and kindness is what made us a great nation, the more we move towards self-indulgence, self-reliance, and an understanding and belief that we're it, and we forget the fact that we were created in God's image. And now what's going on is we're creating a false God in our own image. And it's what leads to Marxism. It's what leads to self-indulgence. It's what leads to tyranny, ultimately, at the end of the day.
None of this has made any sense to me. And really in 2020, it's when it reared its ugly head, even though it's been around for quite some time. But moms and dads were able to see it and hear it through their kids' Zoom classes, during COVID. And so that's when a lot of these questions started to get asked. What happened? What has happened to the United States of America? Now, given your knowledge and your expertise in the area now of critical race theory, having passed a bill in the state of Texas, what will you do to further advance that in the federal government as a sitting member of Congress?
Let's go back to the mid 80s. And there was a general consultant that was in both the Reagan and Bush administration by the name of Lee Atwater. And Lee Atwater had this Big Tent philosophy that we need to, as Republicans, we need to embrace conservative values, conservative fiscal values, and that needs to be the full extent of the Republican message. And then we'll just leave all the social issues, including education, to the Democrats. And, Atwater reasoned in his own little mind that, after all, Democrats and Republicans want the same thing for our children. Democrats and Republicans have the same values. They strong family, belief in law and order, and strong military, and love for America. Well, no, we don't. No, we don't. The Democrats, the core of who they are, they hate America. The core of who they are, they want to weaken our national defense. The core of who they are is to denigrate law enforcement. The core of who they are is to denigrate and destroy and tear apart the family, and to denigrate and destroy this united melting pot philosophy that was America, and to tear it all apart into this tribalistic nation that we've become. And, the reality is that we as a party have got to start re-engaging at the federal level education. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so happy that POTUS, Trump, is getting rid of the Department of Education, because they've done more to destroy student outcomes than any single thing in the United States. You look at kids were reading, 95% of kids were reading at grade level by third grade back in the 60s and 70s. Now you're lucky if 55 or 60% on the average school. 70% of kids in Houston Independent School District are not reading at grade level, 70% in HISD. 30% of the kids right here in Conroe Independent School District are not reading at grade level. So yeah, I want to re-engage. I want to use the bully pulpit to get parents to wake up and to get engaged in their schools.
You nailed it. The left has been tearing apart the family unit. They have destroyed the nuclear family. And it's up to us to re-engage and to really center ourselves again around Christ and living that righteous life. And you know what? We have really advanced this very well over the last couple of years and recently over the last 6 months. So I do have a lot of hope for the future, especially some of the younger kids I see come out of Texas right now. I have 2 high schoolers, and they're very well engaged in conservative politics, and they get it. They fully understand, and they go to school with a lot of folks that fully understand it as well. But why do they understand it? Because the majority of the kids that my kids go to school with, they all have the nuclear family. They have the family values already established. They have fathers in their lives. They have mothers in their lives. They have God in their lives. And that's what really is what the rest of the nation is losing. Yeah, we have pockets of it here and there, but really we need to bring it all together. One nation under God with liberty and justice for all. And that's where we got to head. Now, Steve, moving along, what is your stance on birthright citizenship?
If you're, here's the deal. Just because you want to come across the border and have a baby and then say that child is a U.S. citizen, no. And here's what's breaking us, Brian, right now. What would you guess? What percentage of births in the state of Texas are Medicaid births?
I would say extremely. I'd say probably 60% is what
you're not really all that off. It's anywhere between 48 and 58%. Depend on any given year are Medicaid births. People that come across the border and have babies, and they go right on to the welfare rolls. And it's absolutely devastating, the financial outlook for the state of Texas and the United States as a whole. Everyone, it's crazy, but every state in the union now is a border state because of this.
The anchor baby has been around for a long time. And even Los Angeles, I think, was one of the first real big cities to really test it. And they weren't coming out of South America. They were coming in from China and a lot of these Asian countries. And they literally have built towers for these late second, early third term pregnancies for these women to come here, have their baby, and then claim dual citizenship. So given that same thing is going on here in Texas. As a matter of fact, they were buying land, and I think still are buying land here in Texas and across the country. So what is your take on foreign citizens buying up land in Texas?
So passing legislation in the Texas House and Senate is a collaborative effort. And Senate Bill 17 this past session was passed into law. And Lois Kolkhorst wrote the bill. She got the strongest bill she could through the Senate. But you got to understand that not everybody Not every senator is like Lois Kolkhorst or Paul Betancourt or Brandon Creighton or Bob Hall, right? We're blessed to, just for Montgomery County alone, we have Lois and Paul and Brandon. Had Brandon, we lost him. Wish him well. But the point is they gave us the best bill that they could. It came over to the Senate, from the Senate to the House, but Brian, it had a provision in it that allowed foreign adversaries like China, like Iran, to be able to lease land, dirt lease, for 100 years, 99 years. So what's the difference between buying land outright and leasing dirt for 100 years? There is no difference.
And they're still going to homestead. And they're, I mean, we're not going to be around in 99 years. So really,
Right.
at the end of the day, that could just keep going.
Exactly. So I took the bill and I made an initial amendment on it to try and eliminate the lease provision altogether. That materially changed the bill, and it was a point of order. And I figured that was going to happen. So what I did then is I took the lease portion of it from 99 years down to 1 year. So it's, for all intents and purposes, no, you're not going to take 100 acres of land and build a factory on it. You're not going to take 100 acres of land, or 10 acres of land, or 5 acres of land and build a facility on it, because you only have it for 1 year. So it's now the strongest bill in the United States. It's a great bill. One of the guys tried to put an amendment on it that would allow people here with green cards that are getting their education here to be able to buy commercial and residential property. I amended that again and took that out as well. So a student that's here legally can lease a house for while they're here. But Texas, you can no longer, if you're a foreign adversary, you can no longer buy land or lease land in Texas, thanks to my legislation.
And that makes literally all the sense in the world. We can't go to other countries and buy land.
I used to work for Johnson & Johnson, and J&J had a plant down in Tijuana, and the company had to lease the dirt and then build a building. You can do that in Mexico. You cannot do that in the United States if the governor of the state of Texas lists you as a foreign adversary.
And that won't change if, say if we have, another governor that comes in, or, like 4 or 5 years down the road. I mean, is this something that's been kind of cemented in for a while?
So the way our Constitution works, and both the state level and as well as the federal level, is that no legislature can tie the hands of a future legislature. I can't create a bill. I can create a bill that has a sunset in 10 years. But the reality is that the next legislature can come in 2 years from now and change that bill and eliminate it. So nothing is permanent, and which is why we have to be vigilant, and why we've got to continue to spread the message, and we've got to continue to grow the party and make sure that people understand the consequences of what the consequences would be if we ever allowed Texas to go blue. And the easiest way for Texas to go blue is to stop being vigilant. It's to stop being bold. Look, we would have lost Texas if the southern border had gone blue against Trump. But the people on the southern border, Hispanics, understood that Donald Trump wanted to close the border. And this is one of the big issues that I've got with Dan Crenshaw. In 2024, he wanted to team up with the Democrats and push a bill that allowed 5,000 people into the country a day. And his thing is, well, hey, Biden was in the White House. You got to compromise. Well, here's the deal. Wisdom says there's a time to compromise, and then there's a time to stand and fight. And when you want to open the border, that's when you stand and fight. And look, the people on the southern border, Hispanics, knew that they wanted Trump to close the border. They didn't want people like Dan Crenshaw that want to keep the border open. They have thousands of people coming in every day that we're going to create lawlessness on the southern border. They're the ones, those people that live on the border, they're the ones that are going to feel the brunt of the crime. They're the ones that are going to feel the brunt of prostitution and human trafficking, and they wanted nothing to do with it. When we're bold, we win. When we lack the spine to be bold, we lose and we become a blue state. And so we've got to just keep on putting the pressure on, full pedal to the metal, and pushing forward.
You know, to add, Dan Crenshaw is my member of Congress. I do live in the very district that you are running to be his replacement.
I live in it too, and they're
Yes.
lying and telling people I live outside the district. I live
Right.
squarely inside Congressional District 2.
What I want to say is that when you talk about Dan Crenshaw on a national level, say I'm in California or if I'm in Montana or West Virginia, and you say, Dan Crenshaw is my member of Congress, they immediately say, whoa, man, that's awesome, man. I love Dan Crenshaw. He is more popular outside of his district. Additionally, outside of the great state of Texas, he is more popular in every other state except for his own. And the people of this district know exactly who he is and what he's about. You can just look at his voting record and how wishy-washy he is. One day he's pro-Trump, the next day he's against Trump. I can't keep up with him myself. And it just seems like he is, I mean, recently, look, he doesn't even really have his head in the game. He's too busy playing this feud with other podcasters. We have so much going on in this country. The last thing we need is for a legislator in the great state of Texas to take his eye off the ball, okay, and to have our district fall, to have our state fall, when he needs to be fully engaged with the order of business today, with everything that's going on with foreign adversaries all the way down to Medicare and veterans' rights and issues. I mean, literally, there is so much. Department of Transportation having illegal aliens, having driver's license to drive 18. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on for days. And this is where the attention needs to be. It doesn't need to be with having beef with podcasters. I'm sorry, but as him being my congressman, I'm very disappointed in his actions for the last several terms. And, it's time that we do primary him. And, look, I got another question for you. In 2024, I personally, in this district that you're running to be a congressman, and didn't have power for over 160 hours. Now, this was a Category 1 hurricane, Hurricane Beryl, and it came barreling through. It had high winds, and it took out the power grid for a very long time. We had resources coming in from Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and they got the power back on eventually. But it definitely wasn't Motel 6 around here. Nobody left the light on, and we were in the dark. Now, the reasoning behind this is because there was great negligence behind the state of Texas, unfortunately, I got to call a spade, when it came to these easements, these overgrown easements, having all these old oak trees and branches and all that stuff. You get a little wind in there and it takes down the power lines. Now, we have this stretching from north to south, east to west in Texas. So it was really easy to knock the power out, especially here in East Texas, where we have a lot of forest. Now, what will you do to take some appropriate measure to ensure that we don't lose our power here in Texas if the wind blows 15, 20 miles an hour?
So Texas, one of the blessings is that Texas has its own power grid. And ERCOT is a grid that is controlled by the PUC, Public Utility Commission, in the state of Texas. We are not reliant on grids from the west, the central, mountain, or eastern states. We have our own grid, which is a good thing in principle. The one area that is not part of ERCOT is the woodlands, All right, do you have Centerpoint or do you have Entergy?
Centerpoint.
Okay, sucks to be you.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah, I know.
so Centerpoint's huge. I think their CEO should have been fired after Beryl. He really should have. I mean, the whole idea. He sat in front of all of his customers at the Centerpoint office and said, do not turn your thermostat below 72 degrees. Meanwhile, over his shoulder, you could see the thermostat there in the office set to 68 degrees, right? I mean, it's just total hypocrisy. And he just didn't manage it well. This is a guy that came from California. He couldn't manage the wildfires out there. In fact, they probably I think it was Pacific Gas and Electric that actually caused one of the fires. And here Centerpoint is giving this guy the top job. It made no sense at all. But a couple things during Beryl and going all the way back to Snowvid in 2021, we found out we have too many people that are on ERCOT's board that don't even live in this state, which is, Brian, it's just freaking ridiculous. And they all should have been fired. I don't know who put them on there. I don't know what the appointment process is for it, but we completely did a once over with ERCOT to make sure that they're actually holding Centerpoint accountable for making sure that they do this. I agree with Dan Patrick that the Centerpoint CEO should have been fired, and we should have demanded that, and they didn't. Unfortunately, I called for his firing. I wish more people would have listened to me.
There was great heat put on him, but as we all know, we live in a society that has a 3 to 5 minute breaking news cycle.
Yeah.
And, when somebody is on the hot seat, just wait a minute and they'll forget about it and they're on to the next issue. And that has been a great problem in this country. And it's all media driven, of course, left-wing liberal media. They don't want you really thinking about everything that is very important to the everyday average American. They want you with your mind over here, always thinking about all of the other distractions to keep all of their garbage recycling in the media and taking over their agenda, as you were talking about earlier with the books and the kids. And, you're indoctrinating vulnerable kids it's easy to recruit them. Like you said, you start at a very early age and you take away the nuclear family. And guess what? You've got kids out there that are looking and searching for somebody to belong to. And that's the tribalism and that's everything else. You see, they become easily recruitable. And guess what? Now we've got to educate these folks that have been absolutely, where their minds have been full of just garbage and propaganda, to give them the opportunity to live the American dream. And right now, folks are saying, look, the American dream, what's that? I can't even buy a home in Texas. I can't even buy a home in a small town in Texas because they're so overpriced. Like, what would you do? What sort of bill would you advance in the House to say we need to give, a young family, we talk about the nuclear family. How are we going to continue to build a nuclear family when they don't even have a home to live in? What are you going to do to make housing more affordable?
So this is a little, this might take a little bit of time, but let me, bear with me on this. So this starts with making sure that kids, when they graduate from college, don't have so much exorbitant debt that they need to service that it's nearly impossible for them to also afford a home. So, Brian, tell me, why is it that state and federal governments give tuition revenue bonds to colleges? Does it make education more affordable or less affordable? It makes it less affordable. Why? Because when we give the universities more money to loan, do they bring the cost of an education down or up? It's up. Every time we give them more money, they just make college more expensive. But what they then do is they extend more student loans to the kids so that when they graduate, they have tons of debt. When I married my wife, I inherited her $60 a month student loan for her master's in business administration. That same student loan today would be $800 or $900 a month, right? And so you're going to get out of school. You need to get a job, and so you need a job that is going to pay at least that the first $12,000 is going to go towards your student loans, right? So you're competing now against foreign workers that are going to come into the country, work for considerably less because they're coming from India, they're coming from China, and they have no student loans whatsoever, right? And I put something out about this on social media a week ago, and this woman says, I love H-1B visas. This woman, she said, my husband and I have used H-1B visas to hire several workers from other countries because they're willing to work for what we're willing to pay. And I said, you're making my point, ma'am. You're absolutely making my point. Market forces drive the wage of what a person is paid. And, there are people that are willing to work for a lot less that are coming from other nations, other countries, and their students aren't buried in debt. So anyways, then if you can find a job to pay that enables you to, pay off your student loans, and granted, let's just assume here that you're not getting a degree in basket weaving, but you've got like a master's in business administration or a bachelor of science in business administration, and you're looking for a job, and you find a job, but then you find yourself to buy a home, you're competing against BlackRock, right? Because BlackRock comes into your community and they buy up every starter home that they can get. Why? Because they want to turn you into a renter.
Mm-hmm.
And I fully support what the president has done. And I've been talking about this for years. And I tried to pass legislation against the state of Texas investing in BlackRock. Collectively, we did pass that legislation that keeps us from investing in BlackRock, which that's going to make them angry at me and probably support my opponent. Whatever. The reality is that we've got to stand up for young people that are starting out. Brian, if you can never buy a home, if you can never see through to tomorrow to be able to realize how you can own a home, it's one of the foundational things for being a middle-class America and having a middle class in America is home ownership. The foundation of the U.S. economy has always been based on home ownership. It used to be back in the 60s and 70s, a stat that you heard on the local news and the national news was the number of homes that were being built and sold in the United States. We don't talk about it anymore, unfortunately, and it needs to be the focus again of our economy. So I'm going to do everything I can to advance that.
And, exactly what I was saying is how are we supposed to, build the next generation of nuclear families?
Hold colleges accountable for what they're doing with tuition rates. Tell them that if you want to do basket weaving courses, if you want to do DEI courses and critical race theory courses, if you want to put giant climbing rock walls in your student unions, and you want to build these exorbitant restaurants in your student unions, screw it. We're not going to pay for that crap. We're not. You got to get a college education in line with what people can get in other countries. And if you can't do that, you're not going to get any money from the federal government or state governments, number one. Number two, we've got to do away with these H-1B visas completely. And that's really truly what it's really about. We bring 1 million people into the United States every year legally. 1 million. 1/3 of them are going to go right onto the welfare rolls. 1/3. The other 2/3, they're going to be buying up starter homes. So again, young people coming out of school, they're competing against BlackRock, and now they're competing against people coming into our country that have an advantage that they don't have.
In further, the developers, like for an example, I know for a fact in Colorado Springs, you have large developers there who are home builders, and they're buying up hundreds of acres at a time per parcel, per development. They're building all the homes on it, and they're no longer selling them. The actual developer now is keeping them, and it's becoming a rent city. And, and that's where, the whole, what they talk about, these 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute cities, you're going to own nothing and be happy, all this stuff that you hear come out from the mainstream media. But the more you look at it and the more you see what's going on, you're like, man, this is really coming into fruition here. And the American dream is hanging in the balance. So when they say, well, guess what? You are going to be a lifetime renter, that really takes away you building and establishing roots and having, set a family name and, and really have a place where kids can come home, generation after generation and call that home. And like I said, just laying down roots, I think is very important.
I agree.
Under the Biden administration, Texas was fed up 100%. And a lot of folks were saying, look, Texas didn't leave the United States. The United States has left Texas. Would you ever support Texas seceding from the Union?
Glenn Beck said something once. He said, when he used to live here, although he left, went to Florida, Glenn said, people think that the people of Texas are kind of stuck up and they think they're better than everybody else. No, we don't. Glenn said, Texans just believe they do America better than anybody else. And I think he's right. We think that we do America better than anybody else. I think this is another, I don't think Texas will secede. I don't think that's an issue. There's a book out that was written several years ago called American Secession. And it's a historical account of the breakup of all great empires. And when you reach the 200, 250 year mark, all the great empires, all the great world leaders, world, superpowers just break up. And it's over the fact of fraud and financial ruin. And again, every great nation that is great and could be great and should be great, at the end meets its own demise, and it crumbles from within. And I don't want to see that happen to the United States. I want to see us return to our roots of what made us special and unique, what gave us the greatest document of liberty in the history of mankind, which is the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And those came from a basic understanding that true liberty and freedom comes from God. And if we would get back to that, I think that we could see a resurgence in the United States. I think we could see a rebirth in the United States. But right now, we're electing people that are managing the decline of the United States rather than electing people that want to see a resurgence and a rebirth of the United States.
And you nailed it. 250 years this July. And, the financial ruin and fraud, and this is being displayed from sea to shining sea in many cities and states in between. And the apocalyptic scenes that I'm seeing coming out of a lot of major cities in America is downright frightening. And I'm not saying I'm afraid of the actual scene itself because, look, I'm a fighter, I'm a protector. But this is the downfall and the ruin of these cities. And if this becomes normalized in these cities, we have lost those cities and we have lost the county. And before you know it, that state is beyond repair. And this is where the welfare state and everything else starts to step in. And it's really easy to start going into the socialist / Marxist movement. And you've done it without firing a single shot. And this needs to be immediately nipped in the butt and eradicated before we absolutely lose our country. We may lose states, and not literally, but them be absolute lost causes. And it's going to take great leadership to go in there and reestablish a former great state, if you will, to bring it back to life, to do that CPR, to resuscitate it, to bring it back to the glory years, if you will. Now, you are running to be the next congressman in Texas, too. That is a great part of the Houston metropolitan area. Now, we have over 160,000 veterans in this area, and it's one of the biggest veteran areas, really, in the entire country. There's always been issues with the VA. There's always been, there's a lot of veterans out there that are, they feel so disenfranchised. My voice doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they do and say. We have been forgotten. And I want to know, what are some ideas that you have, or perhaps even an agenda item that you can advance forward in Congress to improve the quality of life of every veteran in Texas, too?
Well, I think there are a lot of tools in Batman's belt to help veterans. First, I think we need more NGOs like Mighty Oaks, which you're familiar with, and I've been involved with Mighty Oaks for 13 years, and we don't feel, as a non-government organization helping veterans, we don't feel like we're competing against other veteran organizations. We need more groups like Mighty Oaks. We need to encourage and enable one another. Because the reality is that God created us as a country to be a people that bless each other and help each other. We created a country that did not believe that government is the solution. Government is very often the problem. And the more things that we do to entangle solutions in government, the more problems that we create. As an example, why is it that we're not giving every veteran a Medicare card and allowing them to pick whatever doctor they want? Why do we continue to try and fix that which is woefully broken? I mean, I've talked, my own doctor, as an example, has said, Steve, I didn't serve. And because I didn't serve, I feel a great sense of responsibility to veterans. Only they can't come to see me because they have no way to pay for it. And I can't do it for free, or else I'll lose my practice. But, Steve, I'd be willing to stay a couple hours later, several times a week, if it meant that I could see veterans through Medicare. Doesn't pay all that great. It doesn't reimburse as well as like Blue Cross Blue Shield, but these guys are like, I'd love to help veterans. And I think we need to get more creative, and we need to put up the choice. We need to push the choice program. It's one of the reasons why Veterans for America First has endorsed me, is because I've consistently down through the years supported expanding opportunity for veterans for healthcare. And I'm a huge believer in it.
One thing I've seen in the VA, and this could be something that, could even be a bill, having a competitive wage. The VA is a proving ground. And typically, you're going to have these large VAs be married to a local college, the University of, Texas, Baylor, Loma Linda, all UCLA. And you have these medical students that are coming in, and they are essentially practicing on veterans. And oftentimes, that's why we don't get the best care in the medical field. And really, a lot of the times, they fail to meet the standard of care. And it's not always, say equivalent to the industry standard, if you will, when it comes to American medicine and taking care of patients the way that they need to be taken care of. Having a competitive wage would keep these new doctors and surgeons and all these clinicians and providers at the VA. So after we train them, perhaps they could even start a career working within the VA and building these rapports and building relationships with these veterans. But what happens is we train them to become great physicians. They move on, and now the veteran needs to restart and restart and restart. And you have a new doctor every 6 months. You have a new psychiatrist every 6 months. You have a new psychologist every 6 months. You got a new surgeon every year. It's like the veterans can never really establish that patient to doctor.
Brian, here's the I like the idea conceptually.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is the backdrop under which it's all happening, which is the government. Would you like to go to work for the government?
No.
Why? Because they don't give a crap about you.
But how can we change that? How can
I don't know that
take
you're
care
ever
of
going to change. See, here's the problem: is that if I have the choice, right? If I'm a doctor and I have the choice of going out and starting my own practice and being my own boss, would I rather work for me and my wife, or would I rather work for the government? I don't want to work for the government.
Yeah.
I never want to work for the government. The government is not the solution, it's the problem. And you only have to read Bastiat, the law, to understand that government will always be the problem. And I love what you're thinking. I love the way you're thinking through this thing, which is you've got to make it more exciting. You've got to make it more attractive for doctors to come to the VA. The problem is the backdrop under which they're going to have to work. Let me give you another example. Public education, right? We hear a lot about teachers need to be paid more, and they do need to be paid more. But the question is pay the reason why public schools are losing teachers? Well, it ranks number 3. It's not. Number one thing is quality of life. Number 2, it's violence in the classroom. And so people are leaving, teachers are leaving public education, not for pay, but for quality of life. And I don't know, Brian, if you're ever going to be at a place where you're going to find great quality of life working for the government, because it attracts the wrong kind of people to want to be in it, to lead it.
Yeah, man. You know what? So I guess a lot of the part, what I'm saying is to just be competitive, have a competitive wage, and it doesn't need to be
I agree completely.
much more, but some incentive to stay. And this is why, when people say, what is causing veteran suicide? I could tell you a big part of it is in the mental health side. When you do have a clinician, like I was saying, you have a psychiatrist and a psychologist that are working in unison. You're talking and then they're giving you the meds. So they're working in unison. Now, when you have the turnover rate in that department that is so high, because they learn, and they're getting a lot of crazy stories from these veterans and everything that they go through. So they're learning at a very high rate, and they're learning at a very sensitive area. So they're getting to be a professional extremely quick. If they say an expert takes 10,000 hours, well, we have a lot of veterans in the country that need a lot of help mentally. So we're getting these doctors in and out. They're getting trained, and then they're heading out. So now this veteran is having a turnover of 8 months to a year, maybe even a year and a half from a psychiatrist. Now they have to retell their story over and over and over and over again until they get caught up to where they were when the last one left. And once they do, they leave. So what happens to the veterans? They absolutely say, I'm done talking. I'm not going to start over again. I'm just so tired of this. And so they end up becoming victims of becoming one of the 22 a day and sometimes taking their own lives. And really, I say that is due to no fault of their own. Yes, we all have a responsibility in life, but if these veterans that are taking their own lives aren't mentally stable, okay, so we're not saying, oh, you are you are a coward for taking your own life. You should have stayed in the fight. Well, what if they did try to stay in the fight and they've been in the fight, but every single time they try to advance in the fight, it's like taking, one step forward and 10 steps back. And how is that possible? Why can't we keep psychiatrists at the VA? And I know you said it's the government. No one wants to work there. But again, if we incentivize these guys, there's plenty of incentives out in the government.
Yeah.
Why can't we incentivize psychiatrists? If the government really wanted to stop veterans from taking their own lives, that would be the place to start.
I had a long discussion about this in Cleveland several years ago with Colonel Bill Chatfield. Bill is a Marine Colonel. He used to travel with Rick Perry. And Bill said, Steve, have you ever sat down and looked at the 2015 Veterans Administration Suicide Report? And I think you and I may have talked about this at some point in the past. But you can Google search right now, Veterans Administration Suicide Report, June 2015. It's a PDF document. On page 41 of the document, it gives you some pretty chilling statistics. It shows veterans that are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, clinical depression, and substance use disorder. Those three things: clinical depression, post-traumatic stress, and substance use disorder. Those that get treated and those that don't get treated. Starts in June 2005 all the way through 15, 11 years of data. And what it shows is those that get treated, Brian, have a 70% higher suicide rate than those that don't get treated. And the problem is that there is no therapy of telling a psychiatrist your story. And Brian, that's not just in the VA. That's in psychiatry as a whole. The way these guys treat people, the way these psychiatrists treat people, they're paid $45 by the insurance company, whether you're in the VA or in private. And you get a 15-minute med check and you're out of there. And it's really like a 5 or 10 minute med check at the very 10 minutes at the most. And it's just patient after patient after patient. There is no telling your story. There is no working through the issues that you've got in your life. It's just medication on medication on medication, which is why I've been trying to pass legislation for so many years that basically says we have to start paying attention to what we're prescribing of these guys when they take their lives. But Big Pharma, Texas Medical Board, they kill the legislation every single year. What Bill told me, Brian, is chilling. He said, you're a Marine, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
He said, you go to Parris Island or you go to Pendleton, right? East or West Coast. You get off the bus, and from the moment you get off the bus, you go through MCRD and then on to boot camp. And you're taught SEER, right? Survive, evade, resist, escape. Survive, evade, resist, escape. It's drilled into your head till it becomes part of the limbic system of your brain. It becomes a learned muscle response. You come home, you experience a little depression, a little anxiety, and what does the VA do? Do they help you work through it? Do they put you in therapy? No, they put you on drugs. SSRIs. And what do the SSRIs do? They numb you from reality. They numb you from the limbic system of your brain. Yeah. And Bill said to me, he said, Steve, that's when these guys take their lives. And we've got to do more for them than just putting them on drugs. We've got to help. And that's where Mighty Oaks comes in. That's where so many ministries, so many organizations like Mighty Oaks come in. And the government could do it. They can do this stuff. In fact, it was a few years ago, several years ago, I sat across from a Marine, and he was tasked by the Marine Corps with interning with Mighty Oaks for 2 years. And Chris became part of the Mighty Oaks team, even though he's still with the Corps, and to learning what we do. And they have been very successful in implementing it there. And I think we've got to take the emphasis off of drugs and SSRIs and put it on to, like what you talked about, your story. We've got to help understand their story if we're going to help these guys get better.
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is, look, the solution here is vetted nonprofits, veterans healing and saving veterans.
But we can do that. We can do that through the Corps. We can do that through the U.S. Navy. We can do that through the United States Army. We can do it through the Air Force. We can do it through the Space Force, right? We can do it through the Merchant Marines. Those are things we can do through the VA. We could set that up in the VA to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could just choose, your nonprofit of choice that has been vetted through the federal government to say, you can take this course, and it could fit anybody, really. If it's hunting, if it's fishing, if it's adrenaline therapy, if it's biblical based, they could really change a lot of lives out there and stay away from the drugs and literally teach men and women how to live again, to
Right.
live a righteous, peaceful life, a life that we all deserve to live, especially veterans that have given so much to this country.
Especially veterans.
The part that is so disheartening to me, Steve, is you did tell the truth. You said, look, these guys don't care about you. You think these psychiatrists, you think they really care about you? Do you really think they want to heal you? And the answer is unfortunately no in a lot of these instances. Yeah, there's a lot of folks out there who do care. So I'm not going to paint with a completely wide brush here, because there are great clinicians in the VA.
Sure, there are. Absolutely.
When you look at, the overall, the bird's eye view of it, there are so many out there that don't care. And that could be why the veteran suicide is stacking up on us. But here's my final, is that in the veteran community, these are people that believe in America, that have stood up and fought for America and stand with the Constitution and have signed that blank check for up to and including their life to defend this nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And when we have 22 to 40 veterans a day that are taking their own lives, you want to know what that does to our country? That right there begins to destroy our country, and all that patriotism sinks lower and lower and lower every day. Like you said, we bring in 1 million foreigners every single year. Those folks aren't taking their own lives.
No, in fact, those folks are living in nice hotels.
Yeah.
Those folks are living high off the hog. Those folks are getting free tuition to college. Yeah. Those folks are being taken really well care of.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our veterans are living under bridges.
Yeah, and the patriotism of the country sinks
and every
lower.
Time you drive by a vet and you see them under that bridge, we lose a little bit of our soul.
Oh, it's tough, and now by that time, a lot of them are just so far gone, they can't even, they're like, I'm not going to say all of them are, not, going to go into rehab or whatever, but so many of them, have, ended up getting, to be, schizophrenics, and, they're just so far gone out there that a lot of them are. It's like, man, what do you do? It's like you can only save yourself. If you're unwilling to want to be saved or to be rescued and to have that second lease on life, it's up to you. You can't make that. The government can't make that decision for you. They can 5150 you all you want for 2 to 3 days, and then guess what? You're right back underneath that bridge. So like I was saying, when you have 22 to 40 veterans every single day taking their own lives, the patriotism of this country sinks lower and lower and lower every single day. Until what? Until we're down to those final 22 to 40. By then, the country is long gone, and we have become a different nation under a different set of rules, and we cannot let that happen. Steve, I'm going to give you the final word here on why the folks of Texas 2 should vote for you on March the 3rd to Congressman Dan Crenshaw.
If you want somebody that's going to manage the decline and support managing the decline of a once great nation, vote for somebody else. Vote for Dan. If you want somebody that's going to stand up and do the right thing, no matter the cost, vote for me. I was endorsed by Trump at 22 and 24, the only member of the Texas House to be endorsed by the president 2 sessions in a row, because when I take a stand, I mean it. I'm a man of principle. I'm not going to betray you. I haven't. I've proven myself. And I'm going to continue to work hard for you. My cell phone is 281-770-7287. God bless you. Brian, it's been fun being with you, buddy.
You know, on behalf of Veterans for America First, we sincerely do thank you for taking the time to sit down with us today. Look, I hope you are going to be my future congressman. And I sincerely believe that you will defeat the incumbent Dan Crenshaw, a guy who, again, an untouchable in the country, but not very popular in his own district. Steve, thank you so much, and we wish you the best of luck on March 3rd.
God bless you, buddy.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.